Welcome to the Here's My Story channel. I'm Bowen. Even though I live with my parents, we treat each other like strangers. We don't talk. I can't even remember the last time I had a conversation with my dad. I only remember my mom telling me to take out the trash a few weeks ago. Normally, she just points to the trash with her eyes. I was surprised that she actually said something to me that day at all. I do my own grocery shopping, I cook my own food, and I eat alone in my room. My parents love traveling. Of course, they never take me with them. They don't even tell me that they're going somewhere. If I don't see them at home 2 nights in a row, I know that they must have gone on a trip. I only find out where they've been after they come back by looking at the fridge, because wherever they go, they get a souvenir magnet and stick it there. They never ask me if I have any money. Thankfully, my grandma gives me money every week. She's my mother's mother and lives in a retirement home. My mom hasn't seen her in years. I visit her every Friday. I'm sure you're curious to know why they are treating me this way. I'll tell you why. Because they think I ruined their lives. My mom was only 20 years old when she got pregnant with me. She and my dad were both law school students. My mom gave birth to me even though she didn't want me at all. Because of that, she never got her degree. My dad also had to quit school and started working to be able to support us. One day, when I was in elementary school, my mom said to me, "If it wasn't for you, both your dad and I would have been successful lawyers today. But instead, I'm working as a secretary, and your dad is a mechanic. In case you're not aware, you destroyed our lives." Of course, hearing that at such a young age made me really upset. Now, I don't feel guilty, but I can't really say that I'm all that happy. I only feel good when I visit my grandma. That's why on Fridays, I don't walk, but run to the retirement home. Every week, my grandma's best friend, Aunt Zora, bakes a lemon cake for me. The 3 of us have cake as I tell them about everything that happened that week. I mostly talk about the things my parents have done. They listen to me very carefully, and they always have a lot to say. One Friday, when I arrived at the home, both my grandma and Aunt Zora looked really sad. Their eyes were all puffy from crying. Aunt Zora was being treated for cancer. I knew something bad had happened. Her doctor had told her that the cancer had spread all over her body. Nothing could be done anymore. Aunt Zora wiped the tears off her face and said, "I asked the doctor, how long do I have? Please tell me." He said, "Maybe a week or a month. Almost certainly less than a year. It's really difficult to say this, but I can die any second now," she said. I was so sad. She was as close to me as my grandma. I wanted to say something to comfort her, but words had lost their meaning. Aunt Zora said, "Let's go to my room. I've had something on my mind for a while now. It's time to share it." My grandma and I stared at each other. We didn't get it. We followed Aunt Zora. She took out a notebook from the closet and handed it to me. "I don't have anyone else in this world apart from you two. I think of your grandma as my sister and you as my grandson. This notebook is the only thing I can leave you," she said. I looked at the notebook. I could tell it was very old because the pages were all yellow. I flipped through it, but couldn't figure out what it was. There were a lot of numbers and words I couldn't make out. Aunt Zora said, "These are my great-grandfather's notes. He lived in France in the 1700s, and he was one of the most renowned alchemists of his time." "Do you know what alchemy is?" she asked me. I shook my head. "No." Aunt Zora began to tell the story. In ancient Greece, China, and Europe, alchemists tried to transform materials such as iron and lead into gold by mixing different elements. They used to say, if you mix the right ingredients, you could turn a rusty key into solid gold. There were some who succeeded, but they didn't tell anyone about it. They kept it a secret. My great-grandfather was one of them. Thanks to him, our family lived comfortably for generations. We kept his secret. But I'm the last living member of my family, so no one else is left. I've decided that Bowen is the only person I can pass this on to. And I have some good news, too. The formula in this notebook transforms not only metals, but any object into gold. Listening to Aunt Zora, my grandma was surprised as I was. "Anything at all?" she asked. "Yes, everything. There's even rumors about one of my great-uncles accidentally dipping his hand into this liquid, and his whole hand turning into gold." My grandma said, "Zora, you really surprised me with this. Why do you live here if you're so wealthy?" Aunt Zora smiled. "Because I was so lonely. I decided to build this place because I wanted to have a lot of friends," she replied. My grandma screamed, "What? This place belongs to you? Why didn't you tell me?" Aunt Zora laughed. "You never asked. Don't ask, don't tell." Then she took out a wooden box from the closet. She gave it to my grandma. "And this is for you. But don't open it just yet. Don't ruin the surprise. You'll know when to open it," she said. While they were chatting, I was going through the pages of the notebook. Aunt Zora looked at me. The formula is on the last page. You need some chemicals. I'm sure you can find them on all that beloved internet of yours. Come on, get to work now, she said. Turning anything you wanted to gold. Was that really possible? I was sure Aunt Zora was telling the truth. If she was saying this worked, then of course it did. After that day, I began spending all my time researching the notebook that was from the 1700s. I read through the whole notebook to make a list of all the chemicals in the formula. It took a while, but I finally did it. There were 7 of them in total. After a long search, I figured out where I could buy them. The next step was ordering them. I was giddy with excitement, but when I came to the 6th chemical, my excitement turned into grief. Because this was a pretty rare element which sold for $1,000 per pound, and I didn't have that much money. I could think of only one solution. I could ask my parents for a loan. I went to the kitchen to talk to them. They were surprised to see me. My dad looked annoyed and said, "What?" I showed him the old notebook and told him what Aunt Zora had told us. "I need $1,000. In return, I'll give you all the gold you want, so you can travel for the rest of your life and never have to see me again," I said. They both started laughing hysterically. My mom said, "This boy has gone totally insane from lack of attention. How imaginative. He can turn anything into gold." My dad turned to me and asked, "Did you really believe this stupid tale? You're so naive. No wonder we never felt close to you." I wasn't going to take another second of this. I ran out. I got on a bus to get to the retirement home. I wanted to tell Grandma and Aunt Zora about everything. When I walked in, everyone was crying. Clearly something bad had happened. I went to my grandma's room. She stood up when she saw me. "Zora wasn't feeling well this morning. It all happened in a flash. She took her final breath in my arms," she said, and began sobbing. I ended up spending the night with my grandma. In the morning, she took out the wooden box that Aunt Zora had given her. We couldn't believe our eyes when we opened it. There were 3 golden eggs inside. I took one out. It was brilliant and shiny. I wished I could show those eggs to my dad and see the expression on his face. There was a piece of paper inside the box. It seemed to be a note from Aunt Zora. My grandma took it out and began to read. "If you're reading this, then I must be gone. The day I got married, my dad turned 100 eggs into gold and gave them all to me. Each time I needed money, I would sell one and live comfortably for a while. These are the last few that are left. I wanted to give them to you since I have no need for them anymore. Goodbye, my dear sister." Once again, tears came pouring down my grandma's eyes. She knew I didn't want to go back home. "We could sell one of these golden eggs and buy a house. We can live there together," she said. I happily agreed. Since we had enough money now, all I wanted was to try implementing the formula and to become a real alchemist. My grandma bought us a wonderful house. We converted the basement into a laboratory. I ordered all the chemicals and tools that I needed online. I grabbed the notebook and got to work. I began following the formula on the last page of the notebook very carefully. Like I said earlier, there were 7 different chemicals involved. I blended all of them in a bowl, but I was disappointed because the resulting liquid looked just like water. I thought after all that hard work I would finally get some kind of liquid gold, but this liquid didn't seem any different from tap water. Still, I decided to keep going. I was going to use some eggs for the experiment as well. I dropped an egg into the liquid. At first, nothing happened, but after a few moments, a lot of little bubbles started forming. Then the liquid began to boil on its own. I was watching completely mesmerized. The boiling suddenly stopped. The egg had turned golden and shiny. The formula worked. I'd succeeded in transforming an egg into pure gold. Now there was one more thing I had to do. I'm sure you can guess what it is. I wanted to teach my toxic parents a lesson. I went to their house. Neither of them was home because they were both working. I took all the magnets from the fridge and put them in a bag. Then I came back to my new home. I was so excited. I went down to the lab. I dipped each magnet into the liquid and turned them all into gold. I picked up the Las Vegas magnet and held it high. It was so striking and shiny. I couldn't help but laugh. I really wanted my parents to see these right away. I went to the kitchen and stuck the gold magnets onto the fridge. Then I took some pictures, created a group chat with my parents' numbers. I sent the photos of the magnets to the group. "Are these our magnets? They look fantastic," my mom wrote first. Soon after, my dad wrote, "Bowen, did you turn our magnets into gold? So the formula worked? What an incredible success! I'm proud of you." I wasn't going to reply, but they kept texting me. My dad wrote, "We really need to catch up with you, son. Shall we go on a family trip together? We have to celebrate your success." My mom wrote, "Honey, where are you now? Send us your location. We'll come to you. We missed you so much." At that point, I'd had enough. I didn't expect my parents to sink so low for money. It also made me furious to think that they could fool me with a few nice words. I went down to my lab. My parents still kept texting me. I was holding my phone but wasn't reading any of their texts. I slowly lowered my phone into the liquid. Soon after, it turned into gold. They couldn't text me anymore. That was the last time I heard from them. Welcome to the Here's My Story channel. I'm Dave. 15 minutes into our latest math exam, the teacher suddenly started screaming. "How dare you cheat in my class! Unacceptable!" At first, I didn't realize he was talking to me until I looked up. I was speechless. I was shocked. "Mr. Wilson, I'm not cheating," I stuttered, my voice trembling. "What makes you think that I am?" "I've been watching you since we started. You keep looking at your friend's papers. You're cheating!" he roared, grabbing my paper. "I'm not going to report this to school administration," he continued with a smirk on his face. "But if I catch you again, I won't be so easy on you. They'll see you expelled if this happens again." That smirk. I knew that horrible condescending smile. Mr. Wilson had done it again. He found something else to add to the list of things he could use to threaten me, use his leverage to keep me as his errand boy. Mr. Wilson came to our school at the beginning of the year. I met him during the summer break before school started when he moved in next door to my house. My mom had prepared a fantastic cookie plate, as she does for every new neighbor. We went to say hello. That day, I found out that Mr. Wilson was a math teacher. His wife had also been a teacher for years, but she had retired. They didn't have any children. At the end of the visit, Mr. Wilson said, "We sometimes need help around the house. Dave, you'd be willing to help out, wouldn't you?" "Of course, sir. Please don't hesitate to ask me," I replied. At first, I was happy to help out, but the Wilsons kept asking me until I was doing practically everything for them. "Dave, could you wash the car, please? Dave, could you throw out the trash? Dave, do you mind mowing the lawn?" It wasn't long before polite requests turned into barking orders. "Dave, I called you 10 minutes ago. Where are you? Take the trash out now! Dave, you still haven't washed the car? I'm late for work because of you. Hurry up!" At this point, I couldn't handle it anymore, so I started making excuses and avoiding their calls. But when school started, my heart sank. My assigned math teacher was Mr. Wilson. He started using every opportunity to threaten me, including false accusations of cheating on my tests. In exchange for not reporting me to the principal, I had to keep doing their chores at home. I didn't have a choice. We hold a garage sale in our neighborhood the first week of May every year. People who want to do a little spring cleaning sell their old clothes, kitchen utensils, books, and furniture. Mrs. Wilson called me the day before the garage sale, asking me to put their old stuff into cardboard boxes. She kept ordering me around for hours. When she was done, she said, "Don't forget to come early tomorrow morning and take these boxes out to the front yard." I did what she asked me to do before leaving for school the next morning. My mom never really sells our old stuff. For some reason, she's always been more into buying from the neighbors. When I got back home from school, I saw that our front yard was filled with boxes. My mom said, "Honey, I got some fabulous stuff from the neighborhood yard sale. Will you help me carry these boxes inside?" I was exhausted, but I didn't want to say no to my mom. She just seemed so excited. "Dave, look at this umbrella. It's got to be brand new. Oh, how about this? Miss Renee's brooch, at least 50 years old. Oh, and I didn't forget about you either. Apparently, Julene is a huge Stephen King fan. There's a box full of his books in the corner over there." "Julene?" I interrupted, surprised. "You mean Mrs. Wilson? I helped pack every box for her yard sale. I didn't see any of these books." My mom shrugged. "Julene said they were all Stephen King. Why don't you take them with you to your room?" Before going to bed that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the books from Mrs. Wilson. I got up and opened the box. Sure enough, most of them were old Stephen King novels. I'd never read most of them, so I began to look through them one by one. Among the books, there was a notebook. Flipping through its pages, it contained a lot of notes in an alphabet I didn't recognize. Then I remembered that the Google Translate app can translate from an image. We relied on it pretty heavily when reading road signs during a family vacation in Cuba. I went on Google Translate, took a picture of the page, and searched the language. Turns out, the words in the notebook were Russian, but the translation didn't seem to make any sense. "You have to be careful while buying an apple. Apples are blue. There's a goat behind you. What in the world could that mean? Was Google messing up the translation? I photographed another page. Still, nothing made any sense. An old printed photograph fell into my lap as I opened the next page. The young man in the photo resembled Mr. Wilson, but it wasn't actually him. The Mr. Wilson I knew had a wider chin and a smaller nose. The strange translations from the notebook started to confuse me even more with each new page. After photographing each one, I started pacing around the room. Could this be some kind of code? And even if it was, could anyone make sense out of these meaningless sentences? Suddenly, the doorbell rang, but it was almost midnight. Who could possibly be at the door this late at night? Shortly after, my mom came to my room. Dave, Mr. Wilson is at the door. He wants to look at the box of books I bought from them. He says they may have accidentally placed something inside they didn't mean to sell. I reached down to pick up the box, quickly slipping the notebook inside without my mom seeing. Mom, I was about to go to bed. Can you take the box out to him? I said, faking a yawn. The notebook must have been really important for Mr. Wilson if he'd showed up this late at night at our doorstep. I was intrigued. Luckily, I had taken pictures of each notebook page and the photo that had been tucked inside. I had a hunch that Mr. Wilson was hiding something. My thoughts ran wild about everything until I finally drifted off to sleep. While walking to the bus stop in the morning, I got a text from Mr. Wilson. Why didn't you take out the trash? I started burning with anger, but I didn't have a choice unless I wanted to risk getting expelled from school. I ran into him as he was getting into his car. I shouldn't have to tell you to take out the trash every morning, he growled. Just do it. With that, he drove away. I was sure he was headed to school, but of course, he wasn't the kind of person to offer me a ride. Even at full sprint, I couldn't catch the bus on time, so I had to use my lunch money to catch a city bus to get to school. Even then, I was sure I'd end up arriving late. During the ride, we stopped at a red light. I caught a glimpse of Mr. Wilson at a park by the road. He wasn't headed to school after all. He was sitting on a bench holding the notebook I had seen the night before. As the bus started moving again, I couldn't help but feel like something was off. I got off at the next stop and ran back to the park where I last saw him. Thankfully, he was still there, so I decided to watch him from a distance. After a while, Mr. Wilson got up and started walking deeper into the park. He left the notebook behind on the bench. A few moments later, another man came and sat on the bench. He picked up the notebook casually, as if it belonged to him, but he didn't look inside. He just casually watched people passing by for a good while. Finally, he got up and left, taking the notebook with him. Why had Mr. Wilson left the notebook on the bench? Who was the guy who took the notebook? Then I remembered. I took out my phone to look at the photo I had found inside the notebook. I immediately put it through a reverse image search. I gasped when I saw the results. FBI's Most Wanted was the first one listed. I clicked on the link right away. There were lots of photos on the page. From what I could gather, these were the most dangerous criminals wanted by the FBI. When I scrolled down, I saw him. Yuri Batalov, wanted for espionage on behalf of Russia. He was adopted by a U.S. citizen and moved to the U.S. from Moscow. The family had been arrested for leaking information to the USSR government in the 80s. They confessed to raising Yuri as a spy, but he had disappeared without a trace. He's still a fugitive. This is the only photo we have of him. He's believed to live in the U.S. The FBI is offering a reward of $250,000 for any tips leading to his arrest. I was shocked. I found the FBI's anonymous tip line through a Google search and told them about everything I'd seen. They were immediately interested. An hour later, 2 FBI agents showed up. They took the photos I had of the notebook. They said, "Don't speak to anyone about this matter. We'll take it from here." About a week later, we woke up to the sound of sirens. There were police cars everywhere. I ran outside. Mr. Wilson and his wife were handcuffed. I caught Mr. Wilson's gaze as he got into the police car and waved at him with a smirk on my face. The next day, there were a lot of news stories in the media about the capture of the Russian spy Yuri Batalov, aka Mr. Wilson. Apparently, Mr. Wilson had his face changed with a series of plastic surgery procedures. That explained why the photo of his younger self didn't quite look like him. Apparently, he had still been leaking U.S. defense secrets to Russia with the help of 4 other spies working under him. The notebook was how he coded the messages. That explained the gibberish in the notebook and why he gave the notebook to some stranger at the park. Someone high up at the FBI called me to thank me personally. He asked for my parents' bank account details. The $250,000 reward was deposited soon after. Thanks to my tip, Yuri Batalov, who had also been on the FBI's most wanted list for years, had been caught. The FBI asked us to keep everything secret since it wouldn't be safe for me if I was a known informant. I told my family everything. We decided to use the reward as my college fund. The FBI also gave me a medal for distinguished service. It's something I'm very proud of, even if I can't show it to anyone. Plus, I don't have to wash the Wilson's car anymore. Welcome to the Here's My Story channel. I'm Ricky. I jumped out of bed as soon as my phone alarm went off. I'd been consistently waking up at 2 a.m. to play Roblox until about 5 in the morning. Then I'd go back to bed and sleep until it was time for school. I was so sleepy during the day, but I would still wake up at night to play Roblox because I enjoyed it so much. One night, while playing Roblox in the dark in a total trance, the light in my room suddenly turned on. I got caught. I turned my head, shivering with fear. My parents stood in the doorway. My mom sounded disappointed. "Honey, I can't believe it. Are you so addicted to your games that you have to sneak in the middle of the night? How long has this been going on?" she asked. My dad was absolutely furious. "Ricky, from now on, no more video games for you. You're not allowed anywhere near the computer. I'm confiscating your phone as well," he yelled. My parents had a right to be angry with me. To be honest, I was going crazy with Roblox. Over the next few days, my Roblox addiction started getting to me. I couldn't think of anything but Roblox. "Please let me play for an hour after school," I pleaded with my parents. "I promise I'll never play anything more than that." But they wouldn't listen. I begged them so much that my dad finally gave in under one condition. I had to do chores in exchange for time playing Roblox. An hour of helping earned me 15 minutes to play Roblox. This meant that I had to work 4 hours to play Roblox for just one. Sounds strict, I know, but what choice did I have? After getting home from school, I cleaned out the garage, mowed the lawn, and did a bunch of laundry. That hour of Roblox after work had never been so much fun. One day, my dad said, "Since you've taken such good care around the house, I have an offer for you. You know that your grandma lives alone. How do you feel about earning more Roblox hours doing her chores?" I always loved going to my grandmother's house. I'd take any excuse to see her more. "I'd be happy to help out," I said. But I paused for a moment, thinking about how I could sweeten the deal. "It takes a half hour to get to Grandma's by bus. You've got yourself a deal if you count my time on the bus toward my chore time," I replied. "Deal," my dad said, laughing. "I like this Roblox game. It definitely keeps you productive." When I got to Grandma's, I told her about my agreement with my dad. "Great," she laughed. "Actually, there's not much work to do in my house. You can do my grocery shopping, some minor chores, and sit and watch TV with me. The last part can be our little secret." On the days I went to Grandma's, I never felt tired. I'd quickly finish a few chores, and she'd make popcorn on the stovetop. Then the two of us would watch a movie on Netflix. Thanks to my grandma, earning Roblox hours was easy. One afternoon, while getting her groceries, I noticed that most of the items on her list were for me. I immediately recognized the ingredients for Grandma's famous cinnamon rolls. She made them just the way I liked them when I got back. That day, as I was leaving, she said, "Rent's due today. Do you mind heading to the ATM and dropping my rent at the front office? But then I'll have your card until my next visit. Are you sure you won't need it?" I asked her. "I've got everything I need here at home, thanks to you. Plus, I only use that card to get cash for the rent. You can keep the card and give it back to me next time you're here," she replied. I needed the password for the card to take out the money. I was surprised to find out that it was my birth year. Knowing Grandma had picked my birth year instead of any of her other grandkids made me proud. I had to ask why. "Maybe it's because you're my favorite grandchild. What do you think?" she said, giving me a big hug. I knew my grandmother loved me, but that was the first time I realized I was her favorite. I left her house and went to the closest ATM to get the money. Then I went to her building's management office and paid her rent. I took the bus back home. While playing Roblox later that night, I remembered a new game my friends mentioned at school. I was disappointed to learn it was paid. And even though I had previously bought some paid games on Roblox, none of them were this expensive. That's when I got an idea. I still had Grandma's card. I could just buy some Robux and explain during my next visit. She'd understand. After all, I was her favorite grandchild. I needed 1,700 Robux for the game, which cost about $20 on my grandma's card. The next evening, I saw another paid game on Roblox. I'd already registered my grandma's debit card to my account. I figured it would be okay to spend more of her money since she loved me. That's what I told myself as I bought 4,500 Robux. Unfortunately, the same thing happened the following evening. I can spend however much I want from my grandma's card, I told myself. I'm her favorite grandchild. I'm sure she'll be happy to find out I'm having so much fun with my favorite game. I bought 20,000 Robux with my grandma's debit card that night and spent it all on masks, hats, t-shirts, and games. When I went to do my grandma's chores, I gave her debit card back. "You can keep it and pay the rent again next month," she said. I felt incredibly guilty, but I'd spent so much money from her bank account that I was too ashamed to say anything. All I was able to manage was, "You keep the card. I don't feel comfortable carrying it around." As I was leaving, Grandma asked, "Ricky, is everything okay with you today? Or did something happen at home?" I forced a smile and said, "No, it's all good." "Oh, I'm so glad. You're such a good boy. I'd do anything to see you happy," she said, giving me a big hug. It wouldn't have been an issue if I had stopped there. Yes, I would have let Grandma down, but I'm sure she would have forgiven me. Unfortunately, I didn't stop. Grandma's card was linked to my Roblox account. This meant that I could spend as much as I wanted, and that's exactly what I did, recklessly. I was out of control. I kept buying Robux non-stop, spending it on trivial things as if Roblox had possessed me. One night, when I tried to buy more Robux, I got an error message saying, "Not enough funds in your bank account." That was the moment I realized I'd wasted every cent Grandma had. The worst part was the rent was due the next day. When I arrived at Grandma's, I forced myself to ring the bell. I was sure she would send me to pay the rent at some point. There weren't many errands to run that day. Grandma treated me to her fantastic cooking, and we had such a great time together. But the moment I feared most arrived as I was leaving. She handed me her debit card and said, "Ricky, would you please get the money from the ATM and pay the rent?" I took the card without saying anything. As soon as I was outside, I couldn't contain myself. I started crying. There was no point in going to the ATM because there was no money left in Grandma's bank account. I had spent it all, down to the last penny. I wasn't going to be able to pay Grandma's rent. She'd get evicted from her house because of me. My thoughts rushed to find a solution, but I couldn't think of anything. When I got back home, my eyes were puffy and red from crying. When my mom saw me, she was worried. "Ricky, what's wrong, honey?" she asked. My dad was also curious to hear what I had to say. At that moment, I knew there was no other way out of this. The tears started flowing again. "I'm so sorry. I did something terrible. Grandma asked me to get the money from her bank account to pay her rent, but I couldn't do it because I spent all of the money in her account on Roblox," I said. Dad gave me a wild-eyed look. "What do you mean? Why did you have your grandma's money in the first place?" he asked. "She gave me her debit card. I put her card info on my Roblox account. I don't even know how much I've spent, but whatever amount she had in that account is long gone," I sobbed. My mom stood in shock. "Am I hearing this correctly? Did you really just go and spend all of that poor woman's life savings on a game?" I didn't have anything to say. I simply nodded in shame. "I can't allow someone so irresponsible to live in this house. You're not our son anymore. We're disowning you," my dad screamed. I had no idea his reaction would be so extreme. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'll never touch Roblox again. Please forgive me," I begged. "Don't apologize to us. Go apologize to your grandmother. Your father's right. We can't let you live in this house anymore," Mom agreed. That night, my parents disowned me. I had nowhere to go but Grandma's. I owed her a big apology. I had to confess everything and ask her to forgive me. When I made it to Grandma's, she welcomed me with all smiles. "Oh, Ricky, you poor dear. Your dad called me and told me everything. Come on in. You can stay with me until we get this mess sorted," she said. "But Grandma, I spent all of your money. How are you going to pay rent? Where are we going to go? I'm so sorry for what I did. Please forgive me." I started mumbling through my tears. She said, "Oh, I've known about that this whole time. When you made your first purchase, I got a notification from the bank. At first, I didn't pay much attention, but the messages kept coming. I called the bank and transferred my money into a different account. By the time I was able to stop it, you had managed to spend $1,800. I can't imagine how a smart young man spends that much on a game, but I'm glad that you finally saw your mistake. I couldn't believe it, but having her forgiveness was such a relief. Grandma, you have no idea how much this means to me. I was so scared that I had spent all of the money you had, I said, hugging her tightly. I've been living with my grandmother since that day. I've entirely cut Roblox out of my life, as you might have guessed. I've been working part-time after school. I'm determined to pay back the $1,800 I spent, even if it takes months. My parents are still mad at me, and they have every right to be. I miss them a lot. Hopefully, they can find it in their hearts to forgive me one day.